A very good afternoon to all of you here in Hong Kong at Manulife Tower, and greetings to all participants who are joining virtually. Welcome to the Dive in Hong Kong, Empowering Through Inclusive Communications. My name is Sisi, and I'll be the host for this afternoon. Can I please now invite Mr. Anil Wadhwani, President and CEO of Manulife Asia, for the welcome speech.
Okay, as everyone is settling down, so good afternoon, everyone, and it's great to see all of you join us at Manulife Tower, as well as a special and a very warm welcome to folks who are dialing in virtually. Today, this is a special event for us, and it's indeed our privilege and honor to be hosting Dive In 2021. And like many of you and many allies here, reinforcing our support and commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. The last 20 months has been not an easy phase for any one of us. And the impact of pandemic on one side and how that's kind of created the hardships that it has for all of us, and specifically impacting women in workforce, which is a significant challenge across the globe. But also the events that really caused the Black Lives Matter movement, as well as the Stop Asian Hate movement, which were clearly deplorable in any sense of what was going on. And we added at Manulife our voice to the thousands and millions to condemn such acts, and also pledged 3.5 million Canadian dollars to further enforce the principles of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and in a way where we can attract different folks from different backgrounds to be a part of our workforce. At Manulife, our philosophy and focus around diversity, equity, and inclusion is pretty simple. And that's that everyone, irrespective of one's background, should get his or her whole self to the work environment and create an environment that allows everyone to deliver what they are committed to, what they really kind of see as a fulfilling career, and really realize their true potential. And again, I can tell you we've made some significant progress, but at the same time, we have a long road ahead of us in accomplishing our goals. And towards that, just to give you some examples and initiatives, we encouraged our employees, our 37,000 employees across the globe, to take one afternoon off and invest in reflections and learning. And that was in a way to create a platform where our colleagues can understand diversity, equity, inclusion as to how it impacts them, as well as how it impacts their colleagues as they interact with each other. One more program that we've launched more recently is our tie-up with Hyatt and ESF, and we've created an internship program that allows, again, students from diverse backgrounds to be a part of it so that we can provide them an opportunity and experience to work with global and multinational companies such as ours. Personally, I also have an investing time, and I recently took over the executive sponsorship of the Ability Resource Group. And again, this is a way to lend senior focus within our company. And I think the work that our employee resource group, the folks do, is just incredible. The energy, the passion that gets exuded when it comes to topics like diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the work that they do in spreading the knowledge, the awareness, is quite phenomenal. And as I got more up and close, it was quite evident to me that while we do talk a lot about the progress, there is still so much work that needs to be done in terms of creating awareness, in terms of creating the right infrastructure, in terms of, again, creating the right proposition for people to feel a lot more inclusive. And again, I'm looking forward to this experience as I interact with folks who have disability, but also our employees who are caregivers and some of the challenges that they face when they have to perform their professional as well as personal responsibilities. But what inspires me most is the stories of real people. And our colleagues, when they kind of talk and relate some of their own experiences, and I can borrow from Fraser, who works in our talent acquisition group, and just to borrow his phrase, he has two teenagers who are grappling with the challenges of growing up. And as he describes that parenthood to him is a safety net as his two acrobats are getting better at their craft. Or our colleague Maritis, who has been challenged on account of her disabilities. And one of the most profound statements she made was that whenever she went for an interview, what was noticed was her wheelchair and not her competency. And from there on, she joined Manulife a few years back and has now progressed and got more and greater responsibilities, and more recently has taken over a team leader position. Again, a phenomenal example of how creating the right environment can progress folks from different backgrounds and irrespective of the challenges that they might be having. Before I hand it over to Sienna, I think Sian is going to be talking to you soon. I once again wanted to thank each one of you for making this personal commitment. The fact that you're here means a lot. The fact that you're here and adding the voice, the much needed voice to diversity, equity, inclusion, I cannot, as I said, feel happier and wanted to express my sincere gratitude towards that. I also at the same time wanted to share a story, and a very emotional one, of a colleague, Calvin Chu. And you will see it on the video as part of the Manulife Journeys episodes that we are creating. It's a phenomenal story, and in many ways, again, represents the true colors of Manulife, which we are really, really, really proud of. So once again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining me this afternoon. It's indeed a privilege and honor to host Dive In 2021. Thank you.
Well, my Manulife journey began really, if we go back to the beginning from where I was born in Taiwan. My parents were both teachers. In my elementary school, there was this math challenge. And then, so I actually won the prize. That's the first time I ever won something for math. So in university life, I decided to live in residence. Canada, even my social circle and friends was very diverse. It made me realize that you can have a very diverse life experience and with a very diverse group of people. And sometimes you feel like you kind of hide parts of yourself, but the more authentic, the more open you are, people can surprise you in a good way. Well, first impression is wow, he's a really nice guy, and not to lie, physically, he was, he kind of ticked all the boxes. We talked about it for a while, and everything was aligning. So we want to get married. Having kids was talked about then, and I think once we, look at the different options, we decided adoption is where we want to go. We were there for the first ultrasound. I still have that picture. Immediately after Riley was born, we were the one who kind of held her for the first time and gave her first bottle of formula. So yeah, that was. It's not just a job to me. It's a family, and it's a journey that continue to change and evolve. And it's finding the right people to support to kind of make that journey together it's what makes it meaningful. Just worry less, go with the flow, and things work out the way it's supposed to work out. And don't underestimate the power of a simple conversation. It may lead you somewhere else you don't expect.
Thank you so much, Mr. Wadhwani, for the welcome remarks and also sharing the video. Now, may I trouble you again to come on stage, because please let me invite Mr. Kenny Xu as well, Regional Director Hong Kong Asia Pacific from the Chartered Insurance Institute Hong Kong, to come on stage as well to present our token of appreciation. Thank you so much. So, may I now please invite Ms. Shan Fisher, CEO of the Chartered Insurance Institute, for the opening speech. Unfortunately, due to the pandemic, she is unable to join us in person, and she'll be joining us virtually from the UK. Please welcome Shan.
So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Dive In 2021. I'm Shan Fisher, and I have the honour and the pleasure of being the current CEO of the Chartered Insurance Institute. May I start by thanking the CEO of Manulife for opening our event and for providing us with such a fantastic venue. I would also like to thank our other local festival partners in Hong Kong. I am only sorry that I am unable to join our fantastic Chartered Insurance Institute Hong Kong team in person and to share in the event today. I would like to thank Kenny, Sissy and Vincy in particular for making today possible. Over 6 years, a wide variety of diversity and inclusion topics have been covered during our Dive In events. And this year, we're exploring empowering through inclusive communication. I think we can all relate to what it feels like to be left out of a conversation, or to feel that our voice or opinion doesn't matter and isn't being heard. Over a lifetime, this can have a profound effect on confidence and well-being. The lack of inclusion is often unintentional from the point of view of the person communicating, but this is really the point. As the introduction to today's event states, inclusive communication is a way of communicating which allows everyone, no matter their background, to feel that they belong. So we're going to cover how this applies to all of our workplaces, hopefully a lively discussion on the importance of allies among our C-suites. What have we learnt from the pandemic about ED&I and the importance of staying connected and communicating? And finishing with what looks like a great topic: empower every voice, including your own. I hope by the end of this, you will feel that you have heard some heartfelt experiences from our panelists and been able to share your own through the Q&A and during the networking break. So it just remains for me to send all best wishes for an informative and entertaining afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shan. So once again, to all participants, we're very glad to have you all joining us this afternoon. And I would like to kindly remind all participants here to use Slido if you do have any questions, and use the event hashtag DiveInHK2021 for any questions during the sessions. And to all participants joining us virtually, please use the Q&A tab at the right-hand corner of your screen, which connects to the Slido automatically. Now, please let me introduce the speaker for the next session, Mr. Roger Steele, Managing Director of Hong Kong Macau at Willis Towers Watson, who will be delivering his presentation about inclusive communication in the workplace. Without further ado, let's welcome Roger to the stage, please.
Thank you, Cece, and thank you, Anil, for a great introduction. Actually, I'm just feeling a bit nervous now because Anil's stolen most of the things I wanted to say. But look, first of all, I just want to say I have my role with Willis Towers Watson for exactly 1 week more. Some of you may know I'm retiring. Next Thursday is my last day of work, and I'm very glad that we at Willis Towers Watson have been able to present you with these for today. So please take them home with you and make good use of them. I think the best place for me to start is actually with a little bit of a personal story, because I think what Anil said about personal stories. And what we heard from Calvin is really much more impactful than any list of speeches or bullet points or whatever that we might choose to share. So let me tell you a little bit of my story just to set the context. So as I think many of you, and it's great to see so many friends in the audience here, and again, thanks for coming. Many of you will know I am an out gay man, like Calvin, who spoke to you before. I'll tell you a story of my first day at Willis Towers Watson and how empowering it was, actually. And one of my colleagues, where are you, Iris, is here. She's the wonderful leader of our inclusion and diversity efforts in Hong Kong. So on the very first day, I stood up in front of the 350-odd colleagues that we had at the time, and I talked about my husband, and I told my story. And, as Calvin said, once you are authentic and once you disclose and once and people can relate to you, it is quite remarkable what happens. And I can say I've actually been essentially out in Hong Kong for about 23 years. I've been here for 27, so that tells you for 4 I was not. And those 23 odd years have been absolutely remarkable. And I've encountered lots of different attitudes, but I've never encountered any hostility. And I think, to me, that's something incredibly special about Hong Kong. And for all of you who are part of Hong Kong, I want to thank you for that. But I'm not only out at work amongst my colleagues and in the community of friends. There's a few people in this room, thank you, who've received my retirement email that I wrote to all of our clients without any distinction. And in all of those emails, I said, my husband and I are going to go off to, I'll make you all jealous now, to have 5 months of skiing in Whistler when we retire. But to me, I think the first thing I would share with you about inclusive communication is that same point that Calvin made, authenticity. And, there are people in the room who, everyone here is different. Everyone has your own story. Not everybody is gay. Otherwise, it would be a very uninteresting place, actually. But you all have a story. And I think whenever you are communicating around inclusion diversity, the thing to strive for above all else is authenticity. Be yourself. And we'll come back to a few other points that I think can be helpful as well. So why do we want inclusive communication? And I think, to me, we've all got diversity and inclusion. I think most of the organisations here will have some sort of diversity and inclusion policies or directions, themes that you want to follow. The purpose of communication for anything in business is to, if you like, to make it real, to get people to understand what your strategy might be, but to make people engage with it. And I think for inclusion and diversity and equity, there is one other dimension here that we want. We want to get people's attitudes and behaviours to change. Now, actually, one of the themes for me as I approach retirement, and I've spoken quite a bit, as many of you know, on diversity and inclusion, it's actually no different to anything else in business. You want people to engage more closely with your customer. Well, you want them to change their attitudes and their behaviours. You want people to focus more on one distribution channel or another. You want them to change their attitudes and their behaviours. So it's really nothing very different. And that brings me to the first point. I've got 5, and there's a bit of a hint here if you read the letters down the side, but I've got 5 points I want to just talk to you about briefly. And the first one is about being deliberate. So not just letting things happen, but actually act according to a plan. Now, I did say that, and I know many of the organisations here, you have setups. You might have a team or a strategy or goals for diversity and inclusion. But you can't really communicate properly, again, like any other aspect of business, unless you are deliberate and you know what you want to say, you know what behaviour changes you want to see, you know what goals you want to achieve. So I would specifically call for action here. If you work for an organisation that doesn't have a structure around diversity and inclusion, go back and put one in place. Because once you allocate a team and resources, I mean, this doesn't happen at Manulife by accident. This happens because Manulife has a purpose around diversity and inclusion and allocates resources and gets leaders to speak. There's a deliberate approach to making things happen. So I think the first thing to remember is that deliberate purpose, that setup. Have a plan, have a team, and have a message that you want to communicate. This is where the authenticity comes in. Why is it important to be authentic? Because you can engage with people. People respond when you share yourself. It may not be something that they have ever understood before. You know, for example, you meet somebody who's differently abled. You might more conventionally say has a disability, but a good way to think about it is somebody who's differently abled. They have a wheelchair, or maybe they've lost a leg or a limb or something like that, or they may have a mental impairment, they may have Down syndrome. You may not have experienced that before, but once you can share your authentic self and they can share their authentic self, that's when the magic happens, precisely again, as Calvin said. So one of the goals of your inclusive communication is to really engage at an individual level. And this, to Anil's point, is where the stories come in. So be prepared, have your story. Now your story will be very different to mine. It'll be very different to Calvin's. It'll be different to Anil's story or the stories that you told. But it's your story. And if you have that story authentically ready to play in the right context, you will be amazed that other people will engage with it. You know, we've all met people who just want to talk about themselves and not listen. But once you share of yourself properly, people will listen. And then, you know, you will ask the other person about their story. So I think I'm really talking here not about, you know, how to be inclusive and what you know, how to use the right words. It's more about how to, at a personal level, engage. So help people to identify with you and for you to identify with them. And we get to the voices, and again, this is why I think you know the story was almost stolen here, but it's good. Repetition is great. You really need, as we said, everybody in this room has got a different story. It is the chorus of all those stories being told together that creates the music. So empower as many people in your organisation to speak as you can. Listen to what your women are saying about how their careers might be affected and how equity may not be in place. Listen and respond. But more than that, don't just listen within your own organisation. And that's what I think is wonderful about Dive In. It creates this opportunity to hear from diverse voices and for everybody to learn something from what others are doing. So as you're here today, take the opportunity to engage and listen to as many other people as you can, but also make sure you speak, because people want to hear what you have to say as well. So as many people as possible from all walks of life, from all different diversity groups, listen, allow them the platform to speak and listen to what they have to say. Empathize, and that's again, so listen, 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 listen. So people tell you stories, people share with you what is important to them. Where does change actually happen? Change doesn't happen by just listening to a story. Change happens when you think about it and when you put yourself in the shoes of that other person. So the key, I think, of creating true communication, that communication that actually leads people to change their attitudes and their behaviours, is to create the opportunity for you, for each one of yourselves as individuals, all of your colleagues, not only to hear the stories, to listen to them properly, but to actually react and think about how they should change their behaviours. Now, this is where you may want to consider, if your organisations haven't already done it, things like unconscious bias training, where you actually, in a workshop context, more powerfully than anything else, think together and share your reactions to the communications, the stories you hear from others. So create empathy. And then finally, involve. There is no substitute. So everything I've said now is all up to now is sort of very touchy-feely and very emotional. And that really is key to your inclusive communication. But you need to do more than that and get people to participate in activities, whatever they may be. We found, for example, tomorrow our Young Professionals group is going off for a Sai Kung event. The idea that Manulife has of giving people a half a day to reflect. So create things that are different from, just sort of sitting in a room like this, and get people to be active and involved. So if you do all of those things, first of all, be deliberate. Have a plan, have a set of goals, have a set of strategies, and execute according to that. Create intimacy through the way that you communicate with individuals, telling stories. Listen and allow as many voices, different voices, both internally in your organisation and externally to speak. Use that to create empathy, because it's that empathy that then makes people decide that they're going to do something differently and engage with others in the way that you want them to do. And then finally, create that spirit of involvement. And I must say, of course that's dive in, how fantastic it is to see the change coming about in the insurance industry. So it's always been the banks, and we have some very senior ex-bankers in the room here, and it's always been the banks that have been setting the tone. For those of you, and this, of course, this conversation is about more than just LGBT. It's about women, it's about multicultural engagement, it's about disability, differently abled people. But for those of you who do, for example, have some engagement on the LGBT side, there is an organisation in Hong Kong called Interbank, and I know a number of people here are members of that, and it's called Interbank. I wish it was called something like Interfinance or something like that, because it's a much broader community now. But it's Interbank because the banks started leading things. And one of the greatest things that I have seen in my career is to watch the insurance industry begin to properly embrace the value of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So it is fantastic to see so many different organisations here, both as sponsors, but many of you just coming to participate, and all of you online. Should have recognised you before. Hello. Keep it up, because we have, uniquely, beyond, I think, even what the banks and other institutions do for the society, the insurance industry has a really noble purpose. And so coupling that with the right momentum towards inclusion of everyone, towards diversity and equitable treatment of everyone is a really fantastic thing. So congratulations to all of the insurance companies here who are moving that direction, and to those like Manulife, not only Manulife, but like Manulife who are leading the charge, I say keep it up. The rest of you should all try to compete and outdo this. So that's all I want to say. Thank you very much. I hope to remain in contact with Dive In and with all of you, many of you, even though I will be entering a different phase of life. Please also, as part of your inclusion and diversity efforts, be nice to old people. Thank you very much.
So thank you, Roger, for the insightful presentations. Can I please, I'm so sorry, but can I please invite Roger to come back on stage again for the thank you gift? And also please let me invite Kenny to come on stage once again to present our token of appreciation. Yes, so thank you so much everyone for joining us. Now we will move to the panel discussion, the importance of allies in the C-suite, moderated by Mr. Eric Blakeroth, Head of Insurance, KPMG China Asia Pacific. Please let me invite Eric to come on stage, and also our distinguished panelists to come on stage. Mr. Tommy Elliott, Regional Director. Please, Eric, thank you. Please let me invite Mr. Tommy Elliott, Regional Director, Asia Pacific at Circles Group. Ms. Donna Kirmani, Chief Human Resources Officer at Manulife Hong Kong. and Miss Angelina Lai, Chief Executive Officer at St. James Place International, Hong Kong. Please come on stage. And apology from Mr. Pravin Daswani. Unfortunately, he's not able to joining us this afternoon. So please, thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Cici. Thank you very much, everybody. Good afternoon. And great to be with you with a great panel to spend a few minutes to talk about the importance of allies in the C-suite. Having support is important in general, but having support on a topic where things need to change and things are sometimes hard to change needs even more support. And it's clear, I think, with everyone you see it and you hear it in the previous speeches, that support needs to come from the top down to make real change. It takes people on the ground to do it, but it takes support in leadership to facilitate it, to support it, to promote it, and to ultimately make it happen. So it's great to be surrounded by three leaders who all have their own perspectives on how to support that change, what's important, what they can do, but also what you can do, because it's not just about support from the C-suite. In a way, it's also, I think, it's something about facilitation and enabling, but it's about doing it together. So it'd be great to get your perspectives and have an engaging conversation and discussion around that. We've got about 40 minutes. We'll try to also spare a bit of time towards the end to allow some Q&A from the audience. So be prepared for that and come up with a few good questions to make the conversation hopefully even more engaging towards the end. Let me maybe kick it off by asking each of you how you view allyship in general and what it means for you and for the leadership teams in which you operate. Maybe can I? Yes. Maybe let me start with you.
Perhaps I'll start first. Firstly, thank you very much for having me here today. So allyship is absolutely crucial, and everybody, all of us, can really take a part as well. So for me, allyship means that you actively participate, whether you're supporting the group that are marginalized, be it sexual orientation, gender, age, race, or color skin, or anything. Allyship is about being there for them. We hear them, we feel for them, and we stand by them. And just to start off with, maybe with a personal story, my husband is from the UK, but he has different color skin. So when he and I used to date, every taxi driver, everybody we meet always asks, where is he from? Where is he from? And we get so tired about even answering the questions, because he would say, I'm from the UK. And people typically would just follow up on question, no, where are you really from? Mm-hmm. And we were wondering, well, what do you mean by really, really from? Obviously, that means, they don't believe that is the true answer. They are expecting something else. So now we've got a kind of like a response. We would say he's a Pakistani by race, British born, but now he's actually from Hong Kong. So anytime and people ask, where is he from? We just say Hong Kong, and go through this whole phase. And I think being an ally means, really advocating, supporting them. Doesn't matter, at the end of the day, we all have a different starting point. And we've got to recognize in life that we all have starting point. And to us, particularly in Manulife, other than just diversity, a lot of statistics and inclusion, which is around our behavior, we also focus a lot on equity. And oftentimes people get mixed up between equity and equality. For us, equity appreciates the differences to where all of us have different starting point and making things equal so that all of us, until that day, we all belong. So a long answer to your question, that's kind of what it means to me.
Good. Well, it's not an easy question, so merited a long answer. Yes.
Mine is probably not as long. So to me, I guess allyship, very much sort of as Donna was referring to, is very much sort of the inclusion part, right? There's a great metaphor that I tend to think about when I think about diversity and inclusion, which is it's great to have the door open, which is sort of the sort of quota part, I guess, of the metrics that a lot of the big corporations now tend to look at. But it doesn't really help if you walk through that door, i.e. you get in through your diversity quota, and then people on the other side are not welcoming. So it's really that creating that environment and that inclusive and welcoming atmosphere. And a lot of that is to do with, actually, it's probably a good thing if I don't think of this person with different color, with different skin, with different sexual orientation as different to us, and therefore actually seeing all of us as equals, but then at the same time be mindful of actually they might have different background, they might have been stung by mosquitoes. So I'll go through the mosquito example in a bit. They might have been stung by examples for a long time. So the mosquito reference is one of actually our D&I campaigns within St. James's Place. We sort of talk about actually how do you really understand the point about equality versus equity, right? For someone who might be more prone to being bitten by mosquitoes, actually, if you just every time get stung, every time a taxi driver asks you, where are you really from, you're being stung by that mosquito. So to someone else who might have been bitten once or twice and got a little bump and got over it, might be thinking, why are you reacting so badly to a single mosquito bite? But actually being mindful that they might have just got stung throughout the time and be completely covered in very inflamed mosquito bites. Therefore, sort of the being mindful to actually what they might have experienced is also one of the importance of diversity and inclusion.
That's a great metaphor. I like that one. Maybe let's move over to the other side. Tommy, what's your view on allyship?
So for me, being an ally is really about more being a friend more than anything else, and being there for your staff and colleagues. It's about being a good listener, providing an open forum for people to bring their whole selves to work. And I think, Roger, you made a good point about allowing people to have that open platform for communication at the end of the day. I mean, we're a very small business here in Hong Kong. There's only 6 of us, and then we have less than 40 employees globally. And when we came out to Asia, we really wanted to bring that that small company feel, that some of the attributes and culture that we have in our European business, we've brought that out to Asia, which is really that flat hierarchy, really providing that open forum for communication and the structure that lets people flourish as who they are.
All right, and it's a nice contrast as well, right? Because we've got a very large company, a slightly smaller company, a very small company, which also gives good different perspective on what allyship and also how you lead around allyship probably means. I imagine you don't have handbooks, processes, and protocols.
No, no, exactly. I mean, it's for us, it's much less about having a process, but more bringing that mindset and that attitude to work and creating that open environment.
Maybe let me ask you, Donna. Of course, I mean, if I reflect personally, I'm in a big organization as well. And so we do have handbooks and protocols, not necessarily a handbook, diversity and inclusion, but there is always the question of how do you use the wider audience and how do you reach all the way into the organization and not just a few selected individuals that take a natural interest in the topic to begin with, because those are probably not the people that you need to convince. Is how do you cross over to the rest of the organization to get them on board, to be supportive, to play a part, play a role, give a bit of support where they need to and where they can. I'm curious to hear from you how you try to crack that nut in Manulife.
To be honest, I've been very lucky to be working for Manulife because as I look up at the leadership, here in Asia as well as globally, I often see, actually the talk is being, that we actually walk the talk. And there are so many great examples, and I've become a beneficiary of, at times, sometimes in a conversation, in a meeting, for example, where sometimes people get naturally that want to, share their information, and people get talked over because of, certain kind of enthusiasm. But I've noticed leaders would pause. I've noticed that they would pause, and then particularly, around female leaders, they would pause and ensuring that there is space for female leaders to advocate. So back to your point in terms of the organization-wise, and very typical to kind of adhere to the topic in terms of we C-suites have to really walk the talk and show that and demonstrate that, the inclusive behavior. We participate in events like this and sponsored events like this so that, it really cascades down to the organization that this is something that we, as leaders, really are important to us. We even have our leadership DNA, which is also the framework that we use internally. And having that diversity and inclusion is part of that very much the DNA agenda. And even in our kind of everyday, obviously from HR, we talk about performance year review. We talk about the what and the how. And the how is very much ingrained around our 6 core values. And that's also where kind of you cascade that in, throughout the organization.
Okay. Well, it's interesting. I mean, you say it almost as a sideline that you create space in meetings to let people talk that maybe otherwise aren't too vocal. That's one of the things that I think often comes up with why don't women take a bigger voice in the room? Well, often because they get talked over by men with loud voices. So purely the fact of actually creating space in meetings to do that, I think, is an accomplishment and is not necessarily a given in any organization. How have you created that?
Obviously, but we by no means perfect. But as leaders, I think as Ally particularly, is really noticing that, differences that two people come from. But also, in meetings like what you just mentioned, enabling these values are being amplified. These are, people acknowledge that there are, times where sponsors can come in to help advocate. And certainly for me, when I go into a meeting, I get a lot more conscious around, okay, who are the audience, who are the people that I need to, enhance. And I've done that a few times myself, particularly on the allyship, where I found that, sometimes people, particularly more quieter, they say they have fantastic ideas they've just shared, and then somebody else may be amplifying it. But then I always go back to, it was so-and-so, Flora, that was, mentioning this idea, and I would just kind of go back and all these conversations that you just try to enhance. And this is, to me, as an ally, you have to be able to bring that visibility to them, put the credit where credit is due. Yeah. And I think that's kind of our duties and our job to do so.
Yeah. And it's in the doing, right? I fully agree with you there. It's not just about saying it, but it's actually doing and demonstrating it consistently, which is probably one of the hard parts. It's always great to have an initiative and then people do it, but how do you make sure people continue to do it and make it part of their day-to-day life and operations? Angelina, back to you. Probably a similar question, right? You're in sort of different organization with different constituent parts, I would say, across Hong Kong even. How do you get this on the agenda, keep this on the agenda, and bring it to life in the organization?
So absolutely reflect and echo what Donna was saying, but actually one of the really key aspects of D&I, in my view, and also to just being a mindful leader, sort of Donna was referring to, is empowerment. And in fact, I think it's right up here. And I think that's really important, is to sort of really give, so partially give space, but partially actually being there to train, particularly those coming from a variety of any kind of background and at any level in the organization, to let them build up the confidence to be able to speak up in meetings and share their ideas, and to be able to challenge someone who might be more vocal or who might be significantly more senior, and also to have also to have a platform to allow senior leaders to actually listen to people that come from these different backgrounds and also in different, more junior part of the organization, to even understand actually the sort of to allow them to build up the sensitivity, to allow them to understand the different background and so on. So one of the things that St. James's Place has done, St. James Asia has done actually, is everyone on Asia Management Board, which I am also sitting on, has participated and signed up to a reverse mentoring program, where essentially we've asked from essentially the more junior parts of the organization to put their hand up and and become a mentor. And then we have then facilitated training program for both the mentor and the mentees in terms of how do you hold these mentor and mentee sessions. And the idea is it's really a chance for the senior leaders of the organization at the Asia region to really understand actually what are some of the things that the junior level people are really thinking about, what are some of the challenges they face, what are some of the issues, and what do they really care about, and to then really have that sort of understanding and empathizing that Roger was referring to. And also from a business perspective, it makes a lot of sense as well, because it really allows the leadership to really understand what actually is going on, what's actually the feeling on the ground, and therefore facilitate that inclusion that I was talking about earlier.
All right, yeah, understand that. Putting that back into a smaller scale environment, I can see one of the challenges in the smaller organization be to keep this as a point on the agenda and to make sure that you actually not just do it because people believe they do it, but that you also make it a topic of conversation. Do you do that? Do you discuss it? Do you debate it?
I wouldn't say that we discuss it or debate it, but I think it's more about walking the talk at the end of the day, as we've discussed earlier. And then also, you mentioned empowerment. That's something that's very important to us in our business. I mean, we're a technology-enabled underwriter, and one of the things that we push all of our staff to do, even from the most junior level upwards, is to drive innovation, come up with ideas. How can we be changing systems? How can we be making things more efficient? We really want to hear from that younger generation and the folks that might bring different perspectives, whether that's across product line. Or different levels. The other thing that we try to do as well is have access to executive management. So I mean, we just had a guy start with us last week, and I told him at lunch the other day that I've got to set up that Zoom call with our group CEO, and he couldn't believe that he was going to have a call with the CEO, and I mean that's kind of standard process for us, and we want to make sure that people feel comfortable. They don't, they don't have to funnel everything through me. If they want to reach out to some of our senior team in Europe, they have that ability to do that. And so again, it's just kind of coming back to, really just providing that framework, that openness at the end of the day. It doesn't have to just be about policy, I suppose.
Yeah. No, I fully agree. Yeah. You talked about new people. I think, Angelina, you talked about the younger people or younger generation as well. Do you... probably interested in both your perspectives, but let me maybe start with Angelina this time. Do you see change in what the younger generation want or expect from a company when it comes to diversity and inclusion? So do you see change in the questions that they may be struggling with personally and expect a company to provide an answer with? We always talk about the macro topics and the gender diversity, LGBT, other topics. I'm curious to see if there's a change in expectation or concerns that younger people may have coming into an organization in the insurance industry here.
Interesting enough, I'd actually have to say I haven't particularly seen a significant amount of change, particularly in Asia. Actually, my background, I grew up in the UK, worked for many years in the UK before moving to Hong Kong, and one of the biggest differences that I would notice is in Asia, there's definitely a greater fear, I guess, of speaking up, particularly around inclusion and diversity type of issues, and there's probably that cynicism quite present. Which is something that we're really trying to address through some of the topics that I've talked about earlier, such as a reverse mentorship program. I definitely see that more in the UK. For example, in St James's Place in the UK, we had an intern joining us who is of an African background, and I believe he was the first one, and this was last summer, and he's the first coloured person to join SJP, of African descent. So then he tried to, so he spoke up and he said, okay, this is quite interesting, let me try and change this. He suggested to then promote an internship program that St James's Place Group then promoted, which didn't require anyone to have any prior experience in application. And it was just two very simple questions when we did sort of the application forms. One is, what does money mean to you? And two, what do you believe as a good example of someone who's in financial control? And we had over 200 applications, and we selected 5 people to join of very different background. So definitely see a difference, essentially, coming back to your question, between Asia and UK, but certainly is something that we are trying to encourage. And this comes back to my point about empowerment, really sort of trying to even put this into the DNA of everyone around the company, not just senior management, and let them know that actually is something that they are absolutely fine to think about and speak up, and to understand that it's fine, it's okay to have ambition, it's okay to be asking for development, for coaching, for higher salary, and to be able to speak up.
I think just to add a bit more perspective, I mean, from a small business point of view, it's again, coming back to providing that platform. So I try to, on a regular basis, have one-on-one catch-ups, one-on-one lunches with all of my folks, and, constantly asking them that question from a development point of view. Are we doing everything that, is helping you to perform in your current role? What else can we be doing? Where do you see as your development areas? And whilst we don't have, again, full, complete laid out development plans, it's something that, we do focus on as a small business, and we want to make sure that we are developing our staff over time.
Yeah, absolutely echo that. Sorry, just jumping back
Sorry.
in. And one of the, so I actually only joined St. James's Place early this year, and it was quite interesting, quite stark, actually, when I first started and when I was having that conversation with my staff around, what do you see as your development plan? What do you want to do? What do you want to do next year, in 2 years' time? And a lot of them goes, haven't really thought about that. Whereas as we sort of continue with that conversation, now I actually see a real growth in, certainly in my team, that they are starting to develop ideas around, actually, here's my strength, here's what I'm really good at, here's what I really enjoy doing, and maybe this is something that I can look into. And also, it's also to providing them with opportunities and new platforms. For example, there's a huge area in automation and machine learning and AI, etc., that obviously everyone's looking at and developing. As a traditional wealth manager, we're not particularly sort of that forward in that space, but to actually let people know, actually, this whole space exists, and we can provide you with training and coaching, etc., if you want to go towards that area, is, again, a form of empowerment that I was talking about.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I've certainly noticed the change in terms of, the openness and the culture, the expectations that people have. I mean, as I walk across Hong Kong, certainly in the LGBTQ community is a lot more visible, which is, I think, fantastic to see. I mean, if you go to our Manulife Hong Kong corporate website, you see that how embracing and progressive our videos have moved. I think, there's a danger, obviously, to stereotypical, what younger generations do. But I think overall, as information get more readily shared, people's expectation overall is shifting. The mission, what the values we're adding, the inclusiveness, the expectation of a company like our size, creating that safe environment is absolutely crucial. And people, we're very proud, certainly, that, employees come to us to share about, why they join Manulife, what we stand for. Obviously, there's still a lot more work to do, and there is, it doesn't mean that we stop here, but the expectations of, not just the younger generations, even like, as we move forward further, the division between men and women's, in terms of the expectation of their responsibility back at home is also shifting significantly. Yeah. And I think as an organization in the world, like what Angel was mentioning, it's also beginning to shift, and we're also seeing that from employees.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the things I realized when also sort of thinking ahead of this discussion is that as companies have been and have become much more vocal in what they do, what they stand for, what they want to promote, I think they'll also be held to a higher bar by their employees. Because I think for many people it is a reason why they are attracted to a company, or one of the reasons why they are attracted to a company, because of how explicit or open they are in the causes that they support. I think for the leaders there's even an extra reason, an argument to practice what you preach and to not just put it in the glossy ads, but actually do it in practice. Yeah. I'm going to open it up to the floor as well in the interest of time. Is there anyone in the audience that listening to this conversation wants to weigh something in or wants to ask one of the panelists a specific question? If so, can I ask you to raise your hand so that somebody can walk around with a mic? I see a hand over there.
And then if we got online Q&A as well, maybe.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we have facilitated online Q&A. If we have people online that want to ask questions, then we might, if we can get a microphone over there to the left, that'd be great.
Thank you so much. I wanted to ask a specific question to disability awareness. I find I'm really happy to see the progress with LGBT and women's rights and all the other areas, but disability is often last on the list, and only 22% of companies in Hong Kong actually have it on their agenda. Is there any way we can move that needle a bit faster? Any suggestions? Thank you.
So there's an open question to anyone, to everyone. Who wants to have a first go at that?
Maybe I'll start first.
Yes, please.
I do agree with you in the sense that there are so many marginalized groups, and particularly on the abilities, is a key topic to us. And I'm glad that we've got our Asia CEO actually being the global sponsor for our Abilities ERG. We certainly from HR and corporate real estate, we often look in terms, we have people coming in to actually inspect our facilities and provide those feedback to us. And Sudesh is actually our DEI head for Asia, facilitated a lot of these discussions. It is by no means obviously perfect, and there's so much work and investment we need to continue to do, but at least I guess for Manulife it's been a start, and hopefully more companies, more leaders are much more aware so that we become a better world. Yeah.
I guess another theme around inclusion as well is the whole mental health piece, which of course has come under the spotlight during COVID. I mean, Donna, from a Manulife perspective, what are you guys doing in terms of mental health and well-being? What are some of the initiatives that you guys are working on?
Thank you for asking that question. It's, people ask me what keeps me up at night, and that's exactly the topic. Particularly a lot of people, we've been quite lucky in Hong Kong in that we've not really had any proper lockdown, but anywhere else in Asia, globally, people have been really cooped up in the, confined space. It really drives people kind of, honestly, very stressful. One of the things, obviously, is by no means the answer, but certainly progressive step we're doing is enhancing our mental wellness benefits, the hardware to which we can support our employees and their dependents. And then second of all, raising awareness. We've got a well-being council, we've rolled out a healthy mind program. So just raise awareness of what some of the potential mental kind of unwellness topics like anxiety, depression, and so on and so forth. We also partner with an employee kind of support group where they have professional counselors should our employees or their dependents have questions or they just want to chat with someone, at least that is available. And last but not least, sometimes we really need to acknowledge ourselves that it's okay not to be okay. And for us, we have we're starting to roll out some assessments for people to, optionally do, so that they can go through assessments, so that they can assess, okay, roughly where I am, and then hopefully they realize that and start getting professional help. Because quite frankly, sometimes, a lot of times we get so into the day-to-day, we get really stressed out at work, sometimes, with family and everything else, which obviously every individual have different, pressures. And it's crucial, I think, it continues to be a topic, that keeps me up at night, to be honest. But it's at least some steps we've done in Manulife. Yeah.
Hey, Angelina, back to disability. Is it a topic on your board agenda?
It certainly is, and I think in sort of our inclusion and diversity discussions, that certainly is one of the topics, and along with mental health as well as other disabilities that may not be as optically obvious, such as autism, which is one of the biggest, one of the big charitable sort of work that we do with. So St. James's Place also has a SJP Foundation as well. So that's one of the big topics that we work with. We also actually sort of slightly on the off topic have worked with children with eye problems. As well. So it's certainly high on the agenda, but from a diversity and inclusion perspective, so in the employee and workforce perspective, it is also one of the topics that we're very well aware of. I just wanted to say in particular, I think around the less visible disabilities, I think one of the areas really is, again, on understanding and emphasizing. And really sort of particularly, for example, with autism or Asperger's syndrome, is to understand actually, again, these people are not necessarily on the same starting point as what you might expect from the average workforce, and therefore be understanding and also even be sensitive to some of the signs that someone might not pick up the social cues in the same way that we might do, and therefore to work with them on how to use their strengths, but also to become more aware of some of these social cues, to provide them support, and also to allow them to feel included, and they don't have to feel that this is something that I have to hide away and not talk about.
I was also, no, go ahead.
Sorry, just to write. I mean, we are working also with a school to sponsor some, children who can come in to have some internship, and they have specific, disabilities that we have to watch out, whether mentally or physically. So it's something that we sponsor as well.
Yeah. No, I was also maybe going to add along your lines. I think for me, there's probably two dimensions to disability. One is around employees that end up getting disabled or getting confronted with a disability in their personal lives, either outside work or for themselves, and how you deal with that as an organization. I would personally think that's probably easier. I think most organizations will address that and will create support for those individuals. I think on the other hand, sort of providing a platform for disabled people and make that an active policy on the D&I agenda, I think I would agree with the lady that asked the question that is probably not number one on the list, and if anything, that is maybe an area where there is more work to do. And I don't know, my only advice, if anything, would be is to be vocal about it, because at the end of the day, what I think I was also trying to get at before, the D&I agenda is not just something that gets determined and decided in the boardroom and then rolled out across the organization. I think it's also very much a responsibility of the organization to identify what the areas are that matter and that need attention and that need leadership attention. So I think there is always a platform that you can try to reach to get it on the agenda and to come up with ideas to do something with it or to do something about it. Yes. More questions from the audience. I see one more there.
Hi. Thank you for taking my question. So my name is Adeline, and I'm a leader in IT as a chief architect. So my question here is this. I was just reflecting on the comments that was made. I think, Tommy, you made a comment about it's not about the process, it's about the mindsets. I'd be curious, how much of how do you measure the walk the talk in your organization? Because, I'll just give you a simple example. I moved back from Europe to Hong Kong last year, and I do notice there's a degree of subtlety in the culture. I'm just curious, how far do you go to actually demonstrate that walk the talk culture? Do you actually, for example, call out behaviors that are not supportive of diversity and inclusion, or do you actually promote more of that? I'd be curious. Thank you.
Yeah, I suppose I can speak from my perspective, and I guess kind of coming from the small company. I mean, I suppose it's a bit difficult for us to measure. I mean, it's more for me as a leader to be taking the pulse of our people and being aware of how they are and how they're feeling. And if something's off, you need to engage that person and find out what the issue is. So that's really I guess a way that we manage it, is just to continually be aware of what's happening within our small team and what we like to think of as a family environment at the end of the day. And how you measure it is output, I guess, at the end of the day, and whether folks are happy to come to the office, whether they're engaged, and being social with their colleagues. I mean, it's providing that safe space and that environment for people to flourish as their whole selves.
All right. In a Manulife or St. James's Place context, do you have KPIs for walking the talk? What?
I see people laughing because KPIs is in our blood and core DNA. Everything's, because it's great to have chats and talks, but at the end of the day, it's the KPIs that hold true to us, how we're doing. We have lots of KPIs on that front.
We do as well. So as a group, I think, and obviously this is quite a recent topic discussion. So in 2019, we have signed up to essentially committing to 10% diverse workforce from ethnic minority groups by 2023, and also 30% in senior leadership in women by 2025, I believe.
Okay, great. Look, we need. I see your hand, and I would love to give you a microphone, but I also saw a sign with a number of minutes that we still have left. So unfortunately, I've got to bring it to a close, but maybe we can take it outside the meeting. Look, let me ask the panel one final question, each one of you. When you think about D&I, allyship, and the role of leadership, what's the number one message that you would give to the audience in the room and online around the world when they listen to this conversation? Can I maybe start with you?
Sure. So, I mean, I think for me, I guess coming back to the theme of walking the talk, it's about being open and it's about being vulnerable, right? So, if you're not open with your team and with your staff, then how can you expect them to be? So you've got to start with yourself, and you've got to bring that mindset in, and hopefully then by doing so and by being vulnerable and by being open and recognizing that we all have issues and things that we're dealing with and talking openly about those, hopefully you've created that safe space for your colleagues as well.
Great answer. Thank you very much for that, Tony. Angelina.
For me, it's empowerment, and with that along, so that comes from the listening, the understanding, the really getting empathy through understanding where people have come from, and then helping them to empower them, and being sensitive to their potential weaknesses or sort of areas that they might not feel that they're as strong as some of their other colleagues, and also to work with them on strengths and really sort of helping them to build up the confidence.
Okay. Donna?
Similar to Tommy, I think I would start with the self.
Yeah.
Always start with the self, seek to understand, and always assume good intention. And I think once you start with self, particularly the more senior you go, the more visible you will be. And that's even more important that you start with the self. There's so much information there is out there. And even if you make a mistake, apologize. Just be authentic to the point earlier. Be yourself, understand, seek to understand, and start with one.
Wonderful. Good. Look, thank you all very much for your insights, perspectives. I hope you found it engaging. Thanks for your questions. I'll hand it over to Sissy to get us to the next topic. Thank you very much.
Yes, so thank you so much to the presenters for the insightful discussion. Please remain on stage. Now, please let me invite Kenny to come on stage to present our token of appreciation to the moderator and panelists. Kenny, please. Thank you. Thank you. So we've come to the end of the first part of Dive In Festival in Hong Kong, and there'll be a 20-minute break. So we start again at 3:35 p.m. Hong Kong time with exciting presentation and panel discussion, how to foster equality and empowerment, the future of diversity and inclusions, lessons from the pandemic on the workplace, and how to empower every voice, including yours. Thank you, and see you in 20 minutes. A very good afternoon to all of you here in Hong Kong at Manulife Tower, and greetings to all participants who are joining virtually. Welcome back to Dive In Hong Kong, empowering through inclusive communications. Now we will start the second part of Dive In Hong Kong with presentation by Kennedy's partner. I would like to kindly remind all participants here to use Slido and even hashtag at DiveInHK2021 for any questions during the session. To all participants joining us virtually, please use the Q&A tab at the right-hand corner of your screen, which connects to Slido automatically. Now, may I please invite Ms. Joni Ko, partner at Kennedy's, and Mr. Wilson Tam, partner at Kennedy's, who will be delivering the presentation about equality and empowerment in the workplace. Let's welcome. Thank you.
So we're delighted to be here today to be able to talk about equality and empowerment in the workplace. And I think what we're going to do is we're going to start and talk about what we think is equality. Now, it can mean something different to different people, but for us, we'd like to focus on gender equality, racial equality, and workplace equality, and having equal opportunity for all. Oops. So someone in the audience said, what does equality mean? Equality to us means eliminating unconscious bias, not judging someone, and as a peer said in the audience, not judging people with colored glasses, not judging a book by its cover, as we're told when we're younger. And we'll talk about examples of gender equality next, but what we really want to achieve is not to have to highlight examples, but really for equality to be the norm.
Right. So perhaps everyone would have watched about the Tokyo Olympics 2020. And in fact, actually, the Tokyo 2020 is named as one of the most gender equal games of all times. Now, they have made some small changes, like the flag bearers. Each country will have to encourage to have 2 flag bearers, 1 male and 1 female. Now, this is a small change. However, that has actually bring up to a huge knowledge or huge idea as to promote gender equality. And in fact, for the whole game, they will manage to achieve a 50-50 equal of men and women's game during the whole Tokyo Olympic. Apart from that, I was told that there are 49% of the participants are actually female participants during the game. So we can actually learn quite a lot from these sports games, because sports is always the best platform to promote equality, to promote teamwork and collaboration. And perhaps this is also the reason why the United Nations has also named gender equality as one of the goals to promote and enhance a better world, to transform this world to better and sustainable world going forward. And like everyone here, we are spending our prime time at our workplace. Perhaps like 1/3 of our prime time would be spent in the workplace. So in terms of talent recruitment, no one would like to spend such an enormous time of their prime time in the workplace that doesn't actually promote equality or respect their own individuality.
No, I totally agree with that. We're increasingly sometimes spending more and more time in front of our computers in our workplace, and equality is really important for pursuing an inclusive workplace. But we wanted to talk about other themes as well, because Equality means to us saying no to discrimination, having equal opportunity, as well as celebrating differences that we see in people. And no matter whether you're looking at discrimination from a legal perspective, we should be saying no to discrimination, irrespective of whether that characteristic is protected by law. So saying no to racial discrimination, discrimination based on religion, gender, pregnancy, family status, and we talked about disability as well as age. At Kennedy's, for example, we do try and make a difference, and it's one of our core values, our motto. And when we're talking about disability, we don't judge based on whether you do or do not have a disability. And in fact, we have set out a goal for ourselves to help less advantaged local groups by committing to CSR activities, but also hiring individuals who are intellectually less capable to assist around the office.
Well, I think for a large corporation, that will be more easily manageable because we have the resources and we should provide those opportunities for those that actually in needs.
Indeed. So I stand to be corrected, but empowerment, I believe, doesn't have a straightforward definition. But to us, it's about giving your employees, your colleagues, your peers, tools, training, and platform to enable them to succeed in the goals that they set out to achieve. So it might be giving them a voice, a platform to provide feedback. We heard about reverse mentoring, which I think is a really good idea. Providing opportunities for everyone to grow and autonomy to take on responsibilities and have the confidence and engagement to recognize their contribution. So we really like this quote. It's from Vicky Lau. She's the head chef at Tate Dining. And essentially she said, empower the woman next to you as well, so they can rise together with you. And we think the quote is equally applicable, whether it's a man, woman, amongst your peers. And it also touches upon the theme, allyship, having an ally that will empower you and voice your views so that you too can feel empowered and rise to achieve whatever you seek to achieve. It's about feeling empowered, and it's also about empowering others.
Right, so for empowerment in terms of law firms and in terms of the legal practice area, the traditional thinking might be that it's a male-dominating industry, or usually the male lawyers will actually get promoted to a more senior level. However, actually the truth is, when I was young, when I was a kid, there are actually 80% of my classmates are female, right? So it would be extremely hard if we, are just trying to focus our recruitment to male graduates. So gender equality is very, very important in our legal industry as well. And we do have to take note of the difference between gender and to provide them the necessity tools like Joni just mentioned as to how they can empower and how they can continue to grow their career in the industry. Right. For one of the usual topics that we are always discuss about is how to promote or how to provide the setup for moms to help in our practice and how to make them feel that being a mom would not be an obstacle to their career progress, or at least working in our firm.
Yes, definitely. And with the majority of our lawyers being female, it's really important for us to provide the platform and the ability really for them to thrive in the workplace so that we can retain talent. I can talk from personal experience really that a lot of firms, a lot of companies now, whether because they've renovated their new office, they will provide a nursing room for new mothers, but from our experience, some 10 years ago, it was a locked meeting room with curtains, and you made do. I've heard horror stories about people having to nurse in the toilet, which we've moved a long way from there, but again, we need to make that the norm so that that is available for all moms that are out there to the extent possible. But employers need to recognize that parents have an added set of responsibilities and priorities, and it's not about moms, it's about dads as well. How do we empower dads and provide them with the platform to have a work-life balance and to be able to commit to family duties?
Right. I was the lucky one because way before the government implement the regulations on providing paternity leave for fathers, we already got that benefit from the firm. And I was lucky to enjoy those benefits from time to time. And apart from that, I was also lucky to have some colleagues who were also daddy of newborn babies and young kids working with me together. So what we usually do within the firm is to share our knowledge openly. And we help each other to provide the mental support and to provide the knowledge sharing. So on the one hand, we can save the time of just looking after or looking for the information that we require. On the other hand, we can also have more time to spend on work together, and the collaboration that has been created, the bonding that has been created as a result is actually quite enormous and positive for the whole firm, actually. So one thing that I would like to stress is LGBT commitments and to this community, because we are actually having a global managing partner who is openly to say that she is gay, and she is also married to her partner as well. So this is actually very important and means a lot to the firm and actually within Hong Kong, because I think in Hong Kong there's a traditional Chinese thinking that the junior might not be so willingly or openly to open up themselves and speak up about their, whether their sexual orientation or whether their preferences, they might not be so willingly to share. However, by seeing a senior person within the firm that is so supportive of the LGBT community, then that will really help the junior to open up their mind and to feel more comfortable to work with us.
Yep, and I think the message we want to get across is really, if you're in a position of leadership, use it. Use it to promote, dive in, diversity and inclusion, and do make the workplace a better one.
Yep.
Make a difference, we say. I use this hashtag all the time on LinkedIn. In fact, it's one of the core values of Kennedy's. But what we're saying is, we're not just talking about empowerment, amongst your colleagues, peers. We're talking about empowering your clients as well, whether it's through innovative products or providing other resources. So we're empowering them to achieve their goals independently from us. And we always get the question, well, don't you want your clients to be engaging you, paying you fees? But that's not the ultimate goal. We see society changing, we see technology changing, and for us, we're here to empower our clients as well as our own colleagues and peers.
Yeah. Right. So one of the sports that I'd always mention is racing, car racing, right? In the past, maybe there's a general perception that this sport is actually male-dominated, but actually, in fact, it isn't. There are various female racing drivers in the past in various racing, Formula racing, rally racing, MotoGP, everyone. So these are all the gender equality concept and idea that has been planted within the sports. And in the recent years, we also see the W Series, which is a racing dedicated for female racing driver, and also the Extreme E Series, that is a racing that you have to have a team comprised of 2 drivers, 1 male, 1 female, all these are helping to push the boundary further apart, to keep the door open, to make sure that the gender equality would not be, hindered in a sports that people might think that it is male-dominated.
And I think it's not just about equality, it's about sharing stories, inspiring others, because had you not told me, I wouldn't have known that there were female Formula drivers as long ago as, a couple of decades ago. But when you're aware that there are these equal opportunities out there, promote them so that there's more awareness around you.
Strategies. Now, we've mentioned about a lot of conceptual and mindset thing. Perhaps we can share our firm's practice and some ideas for perhaps discussion purpose. We do have very clear and simple, straightforward guidelines in terms of how to value the contribution for each employee. For fee earners, we all adhere to a very clean and simple timesheet system. So your work will be measured straightly by your timesheet. Now, this means a lot for many of our colleagues who might not always be able to be present in the office because of the COVID-19, because of their family issues and every other thing. So if you have a very clear guidelines to measure their work value contribution to the firm, then they will feel their value wouldn't be hindered by their own personal restriction and limitation. And apart from that, sometimes people will also have to work on non-billable things like various CSR activities or supporting the minority groups in Hong Kong. Now, we also have those measures that will take into account our employees' contribution to those areas, and we have various awards for those employees who are willing to work the extra miles to help the firm to promote that idea as well. To achieve this, working from not only from home, working from anywhere practice, we definitely will have to have sufficient IT support. Paperless practice is not easy for a law firm in Hong Kong to have a paperless practice, particularly when the courts in Hong Kong are still heavily paper loaded, right? We are still in a practice that you have to sign on hard copy documents, file them to the court. So there are some adjustment that we'll have to do, but we are happy to say that we can achieve that. So, and that really helps us to recruit more talents where they might not be able to always present in the office because they know they can still contribute to the team by not physically present in the office. And we also have open office and I would say set up for literally the same for everyone.
Yeah. So essentially, we have we've moved to Quarry Bay and we have an open office setting, but really that is just a continuation of an office policy, which you can think about, which is having an open door policy, being supportive, approachable, and allowing people really to communicate their views. So you could ask yourself, does your workplace have collaboration areas? Does it encourage conversation, or do you have closed rooms, closed doors? Start a conversation. I think I was in the audience, and one of the speakers said it's a mindset that you need to bring with you and be open to having difficult conversations. So that you can then get feedback as necessary. The other thing is, do you need to stick to the old norms, right? Dressing in a suit, black suit, tie. With COVID-19, should we be moving to a dress code where you're dressing for the day? because you might have parents who have just come from a drop-off, or you might have colleagues who like to go to the gym at lunchtime. And that providing a flexible working environment, dress code, can actually encourage more dedication and also assist with mental health issues that we were talking about, so that you're not requiring your colleagues to be at their desk at all times. I think, at Kennedy's, we've been really lucky with regards to some of the initiatives that have been pushed out globally. It's really important these days to start the conversation and provide ways in which people can relax, step away from work, because sometimes you log on and then you keep working because you can't travel, etc. But we don't want to see people burn out. We want to encourage people to relax. So can you have a virtual yoga session or a virtual mediation session? We've had that. We've been
Virtual
lucky.
cooking session as
Yeah,
well.
we've had a virtual cooking session. So we just want to bring ideas to you, so that not only does that address the well-being of your staff, but also encourages conversation, because we had a virtual cooking session with a Michelin chef, and then that's a talking point for the rest of the week.
Yes, I think the support from every level is very important.
Yes,
the mental
definitely.
support, everyone within our firm knows that they can always pick up a call 20 hours a day, and if they have any mental problem or mental issues they want to discuss, they want to raise, they can speak, and it's all confidential. So this really helped us to pass through the pandemic.
Yep.
Yep.
And we were going to leave you with this quote. So essentially, creating a supportive workplace will build trust and encourage bonding. And this in turn will bring collaboration and teamwork to a whole new level. We know that awareness of these themes that we've talked about will bring a better workplace, a more inclusive workplace. And what we want to encourage and what we want to see is support at all levels on individuality.
Right. At the end of the day, everyone here is actually in the people industry, and we all have to treasure everyone's value and make them feel that they're part of it, to create a trust, the bonding, and as a result, the collaboration and how to help the firm or the practice or the business that everyone is in to continue to be sustainable and to pass through all the challenges that we have. And that's the whole concept and idea that we would like to bring out today.
Yep.
So basically, that actually has concluded our presentation today. We hope our ideas would help you to, further help your business to grow and
to inspire you. Thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you so much, Johnny and Wilson, for the insightful presentations. Now, please let me invite Kenny to come on stage to present our token of appreciation. Thank you. So once again, thank you for everyone for joining us. Now we'll move to the next session of Dive in Hong Kong, panel discussions, lessons from a pandemic, the future of diversity and inclusion, moderated by Mr. Sudesh T, Head of Diversity, Equity and Inclusion Asia at Manulife. Please let me invite Sudesh to come on stage, and also our distinguished panelists to come on stage. Ms. Shinali Patel, Diversity and Inclusion Committee Chair at British Consulate General Hong Kong, Mr. Jamie Chambers, Country Manager at XXL, Dr. Gordon Wong, Canadian Chamber Hong Kong Representative, Honorary Consultant in Psychiatry at Gleneagles Hospital, Hong Kong, Ms. Cynthia Young, Director Construction Practice Leader at Marsh Specialty, and Mr. Philip Chan, Head of Asia the Hartford International. So please, thank you so much. I hand over the time to you, Sudesh.
Thank you. Thanks, Sissy. Thanks, Sissy. Please have a seat. Please have a seat. It's a full house. If we had more space on the stage, I can another sofa, get a few more people up on stage as well. So I'm not going to waste my time and waste your time introducing people because you already know, because that will take up 15 minutes. Right? So we will just go straight into it. And I have an iPad over here. So this iPad basically connects to you. So if you have a question, scan the QR code on your screen now. It's also for the audience. It will appear on screen later. It will appear. Scan it and ask us immediately because we want to make this as fluid as possible. So I think the whole point is not having questions at the very end. Sometimes you just want to ask that question immediately. So we're going to make you ask that question immediately. I have a screen in front here, and we will ask immediately to the panelists as well. So let's make this as interactive as possible. All right? Cool. So I'm Sudesh. I work in this lovely building in Manulife Tower, and I've been in Manulife for 10 months now. And one thing that came very clear is we are all coming out of a pandemic. We hope the pandemic is becoming an endemic, and it seems to not dissipate. It just perpetuates. But one thing that we have to acknowledge is the pandemic itself has caused quite a bit of a stir to many people globally, from in terms of your jobs, your relationships, your health, your well-being. We only see ourselves on the screen. We dress up above the waist. You can't see whatever below the table. Huh? And the only four walls that you know is the four borders of the screen, and you don't have any interactions. You miss the water cooler chats. You miss all those conversations and the coffee and the multiple coffees that now you only have at home. Your cat walks across the screen. Your dog jumps about. But the impact that has been leaving on minority communities is a lot bigger. So the regular folk have the challenges is I've lost my job. I have mental issues and mental health issues and wellness issues. But if you're from a minority community, LGBT community, different gender, different sexual orientation, different race and different ethnicity, the impact that you're feeling is a lot lower, it's a lot higher and more difficult. Why? Say if you are a disabled employee and for you to find a job in the normal situation is already hard enough. So can you imagine when during a pandemic where everybody else have lost jobs and applying, you will never get an opportunity. It's harder for you. So the impact is a lot greater. So that's something to think about. So in our panel over here, we're going to ask some of these poignant questions and some very punchy questions as well because we have people from various industries. And the first thing that I would like to ask is, there was a report that came out from the McKinsey and Company. They came out with a very interesting report on the impact of the pandemic. And one of the clear impact that came out is everybody is struggling. Everyone is struggling, but some are more than others. And especially those from minority communities who have reported an array of challenges, ranging from mental and physical health, concerns around workload increases, fears of stalled growth, especially when you're sitting on a screen, and lack of connectivity and losing the sense of safe zones. So when you come back to the office, you usually have a safe zone, especially if you're from different communities, you have friends and colleagues and allyship. We spoke about allyship just now, but now allyship goes away when you're on a screen. So have you seen that impact in your space? I'd like to start with Chinali.
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to start with a bit of a storytelling because I think that's something that we discussed when we had a pre-panel discussion. So why is diversity inclusion important to me? I was adopted by my mother when I was 27 days. She adopted me when she was 21. In India, at a society where society used to be quite judgmental about what women's role would be in Indian society, her unconditional love and her selflessness has greatly influenced my choice to get into UK law enforcement. For the last few years in UK law enforcement, I've been working with child sexual exploitation, modern slavery, human trafficking, and organized immigration crime. Why am I mentioning this? That taught me how important it is to see kindness, to see things from a victim's perspective. Nothing is black and white, actually. And why does that matter in diversity inclusion in the pandemic today? And I think, going back to your question, Sudesh, in particular, in the British consulate, we have UK-based staff, as we call them, UK diplomats, but we also have country-based staff. Culturally, things are really different. In the pandemic, two aspects came to light. Parents having a lot of responsibilities at home, carers, so there will be a caring responsibility factor, and UK diplomats not having seen family for a very long time, in fairness. And everyone going through their own struggles. Inclusion became imperative. And how do we do that? The ways we did that is through a virtual coffee roulette. So what I mean by that is new staff coming in, existing staff not being able to engage, like a water cooler chat, having 15 minutes in their daytime to talk about something that's completely non-work related. And also looking out for signs where people are struggling. Sometimes it's not easy to talk to your immediate line managers or to your colleagues. Maybe perhaps you find that conversation a lot easier with someone outside your team. Secondly, bearing in mind what well-being support can we provide. And I know the doctor will touch on this, I'm sure. But from our perspective, it's important to bring experts in that can reflect on this and how best to do things that we can do on a daily basis. And the third thing final thing I wanted to touch on is community outreach. Ethnic minority communities, NGOs. We have Faride today from Sensational, who works with the disability aspect. I worked with Africa Center, Zubin Foundation. Why is it important to do that? There are a lot more people in Hong Kong going through a lot more challenges than me. It's really important to be aware of that. And I'll pause there. Thank you.
The sense of entitlement.
Yes.
I think the word that came out was entitlement. And entitlement is something that is different in every country, entitlement. Right? Entitlement can be the way you look, the things that you practice, or your religion, your political stance. That is entitlement. So from the work that you do, Jamie, you're part of a large insurer working on the GI space, on a large GIs, like shipping and all that stuff. And the pandemic has caused different challenges. So are you seeing this happen? And then maybe you can follow on from the entitlement issue.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think in terms of my observations, from a workplace standpoint, I think we've seen an accelerated or forced adoption of smart working or remote working due to the kind of pandemic situations. But I think actually during that time, we've actually proven to ourselves from a business and productivity standpoint that we can be as productive, if not more productive, given the increased connectivity that we now have through the technology that's been adopted through this time. And actually, smart working, I think in itself has raised the issues of work-life balance. And I think from a positive perspective, we're far more open to talk about work-life balance and embrace the benefits of what that can bring for individuals within the organization. But with that comes a lot of challenge as well. I think, with the increased connectivity that we've seen, with the positive result of the productivity, comes a situation where staff are probably too connected during the period of a day. They're online for too long, they're working too long hours. And I think we need to be very, very aware of that from a mental health standpoint, particularly given that as managers and leaders, we're expected to manage and observe these things in a far more remote way than we've never been expected to before. So back to the kind of remote working and smart working thing, I think fundamentally I truly believe it's very good for organizations. I think it's very good for individuals, but I think there's a lot of adaptation and learning that we need to go through before we really reap the benefits, both from a kind of organizational standpoint and from an individual standpoint. And I think at the heart of it, inclusion is the kind of foundation of that kind of new working concept, because it has to become far more about individual rather than broad collective. And I think we've heard many people today talk about equity versus equality. And I think that's at the heart of this new way of working that we find ourselves in.
Nicely said. I think that will skew in really, I think you mentioned about mental health, and you mentioned about mental health as well. And of course, the doctor is looking at me, you're going to ask me a mental health question, of course, but I'm keeping the doctor to the end. You'll give him a one whack question afterwards. But let's go over to Philip over the other side. Right. So, I mean, you're part of a large insurance group based out of North America, and there's different nuances, North America challenges and Asia challenges, working from home, at work, hybrid. How has you seen that impacted your area and your business?
Well, thank you for the question. And of course, in United States, in the company where we have a much larger population of employees, so they have better resources to handle the like what we mentioned about equality and equity. Of course, I would say the safety and health basically is on the priority list of all employers. So you know, from all the regulatory information or communication, so the senior management will have the responsibility to explicitly talking to all the employees. Say for example, regulatory issue doesn't allow you to do this, and then the senior management have to talk to the staff. Just talking about communication, there's the basic element, I would say, what I call the stigma-free culture in the company. This sort of culture have to come up from the very top of the company, because he himself or she herself would be a role model for all this. And then with his allocated resources and also his role model, all the team leaders or department heads will follow. So make sure the whole organization, the whole company is adapting that kind of culture, so they can speak freely among employees, no discrimination whatsoever. So to encourage people to speak out. Well, I mean, we have learned quite a lot from the speaker today, and we talk about openness, authenticness as such. So these are the basic elements for communication. And yeah, that sort of thing is, I would say, is very important. Back to Jamie said, whether we can have what we call a stacker way to coming back to the office. That's some sort of a hybrid model of operation. And we have also have to take care about our staff. Whether they personally have their own, I wouldn't say issue, they may have a problem. Say, for example, in Hong Kong, as you can see, a lot of housework, working couples, they rely on a nanny or helper to do the work. But for the time being, as you can see, quite a lot of them were not able to come, I mean, because of the COVID situation. So as employers, we have to understand the situation, so just to help them out, because like we're going to cover the anxiety and stress, but just to reduce the stress and anxiety to coming back to work as well.
It's a good one, Philip. I think you mentioned something that I read earlier this morning, something called the double shift.
Yeah.
So the double shift concept is interesting. So mothers especially, not only the shift of taking care of the kids, at the same time the shift of even working. So when you have kids at home running about and you're also working in a call at the same time and you have to turn off the camera. You know, there's two things that I really don't like. One thing is turning off the camera, and next is you're on mute. I'm sure everybody has used that sentence, you're on mute. But there is a reason why people go on mute, because of the disturbances at the back. And this is the problem of double shifting. And sometimes it's triple shift.
Yeah.
When you have to take care of your husband also. Where's my coffee?
Yeah.
You know, it's like, so it does cause a lot of strain. And I'm looking at Cynthia now. So you deal with many clients. And many companies come to you for, I want this benefit, that benefit, I want this, I want that. So, and you see the world, you see all the differences, the best practices. So based on all this, how do you advocate the right thing to do to your clients?
I guess, it's like everyone, facing the challenges. Just before I start, I just want to respond to, earlier. One more thing is my, neighbors always renovating when I'm working from home. Yeah, I just don't understand.
Go mute.
Yeah, but I guess, with all the businesses, all the clients, of course, they face all the challenges. Some business, I guess, for us, insurance, we are luckier. We can do things from home with technology. We can offer flexibility, communicate with our colleagues easier. But with some of the clients, like construction, for example, it's where they're focusing on. They don't have, the luxury to work from home. They have to, work on site, go on site. I guess, our clients were facing enhanced, safety and health awareness. They've done, way too much more, like vaccination or testing before the vaccination. They've run a lot of, like seminars, webinars, not webinars for them, obviously, but they spend much more resources on that. And we try to help as, insurance broker, we try to offer help for, construction or F&B businesses, hotel businesses, like that,
Thanks, Cynthia. I mean, for roles and jobs that require you to be on site, you can't build virtually.
No.
It'd be nice to build, it's like that phrase, we build virtually, it's quite nice, but you can't.
No.
And that is a different challenge already. How do you social distance a building site?
No, we can't. But as I always said, I guess, Hong Kong are quite lucky. We don't have, construction sites shut down. We don't have lockdown so far. So I guess, and also we don't have imported, labors. And that's why it helped a little bit, so that we don't have the cluster problem that, Singapore had earlier on.
Yep.
Yeah.
So Hong Kong is a bit lucky because it's a bit more self-sustaining.
Yes.
And this is something that we have slowly started to realize, that Hong Kong is becoming a bit more self-sustaining and not so dependent on people outside. We've always thought that Hong Kong is very dependent on everybody else, but if you think about it, not really. They're quite all right. Now I'm looking at Dr. Gordon Wong. All the pressure's on him now, right? So it's like everybody is saying the same thing. Challenges, mental health. I pulled out some stats the other day. So Hong Kong has about 15.1 people committing suicide for every 100,000. Gosh. And as of 2 years ago in 2019, it was at 2.75 suicides per day. And now it's about 3.2 people committing suicide every day. And this is alarming. These are alarming numbers. And the ratio increases drastically for people from minority communities. And you see patients, and you see people coming in with challenges. So how do you think the world has changed, and how do you think it's going to get better?
So indeed, in my work as a psychiatrist, I have seen a lot of anxiety and mood disorders after the pandemic. So there has indeed been an increase in suicide rates in the past year, unfortunately. And last August, I remember hearing my colleagues from the Accident and Emergency Department that the suicide rate, or the number of suicides who went into the A&E doubled compared to July. So that was quite alarming indeed. So there has been a lot more anxiety, a lot more depression in the past year, and studies have confirmed this. So there are various studies done in Hong Kong, and especially in sexual minority populations. A CUHK study revealed that over 30% of the people studied, of the LGBT people studied, they had anxiety or depression. So it is a very alarming phenomenon indeed.
And it's a nice thing that you pointed out. So for LGBT plus employees, so the same research from McKinsey states there's increased fears of isolation and losing ground at work in absence of interactions with other LGBT plus colleagues, their ERGs and allies at work. So when you feel that you have lost that safety net, and now you're stuck at home and you can't, and especially in Hong Kong, where a lot of our LGBT plus colleagues have not come out at home. They come out at work. So the work is that safety net, and that is where the challenges come across. Some amazing questions are coming online. So I'd like to pick on one that's on screen now. That's straight to you. There, you see, popular guy, I'm telling you. So question to Dr. Wong. Do you have any tips on how to socially and professionally approach friends, colleagues, patients with common psychiatric disorders?
So for common psychiatric disorders, I take it to mean like depression or anxiety. So a lot of people with anxiety or depression, they often say that they don't want to be singled out. So they don't want to have special treatment, because if they did get special treatment, they are reminded of the fact that they have a problem. So a lot of them say that they don't want special treatment. So my advice, or my advice would be, just treat them as you would treat anyone else. Yeah, just treat them as you would with anyone else.
Be cognizant. So I think we always think mental health is a disease, like how it was being gay was a disease, and being born of a different skin color was a disease of a pigment. When I was growing up, I remember my mother made me use Fair and Lovely. If you, I'm sure you know Fair and Lovely, until it came to a point like a few years ago that it was banned because it was cancer causing. It didn't work though. So there was another question here. So what should companies do in pushing the envelope of D&I? So I'm looking at you, Chinali. You do this work through the consulate. So what can companies do more?
I think, first of all, I like to be quite candid and say it's not always easy to be authentic. It's not always easy to speak up. I think when we say that, a lot of factors, as previous panelists have said, that needs to be in place. Where the British Consulate is concerned, I think my first thing when I looked at our staff survey results, we quickly recognized people were too scared to speak up. And that often was because much of that would be line management related, so they couldn't address it. So one of the first things we did is get independent mediators, independent investigators that reached that situation, creating, what we call fast response officers. And Maggie's one of them who's accompanied me today. She's a brilliant colleague of mine and a support system for me, just a shout out, through my IVF treatment. So that's really important. Having a broader support system just than a line management, that's the first. Secondly, it's also about having clear guidance and policies and processes. COVID is evolving, our response to that is evolving, so it's really essential to ensure that staff voices are heard, they're consulted, and then you take that policy and process into embedding that within your organization. Third thing is leading by example. We all talked about walk the talk, but I think actions speak louder than words. So in our instance, whether it's coffee roulette, whether it's community engagement, whether it's ensuring that staff voices are heard, leadership has to do that at every step. And that onus also falls into every line manager within the organization. So that's our approach within the consulate.
It's a nice one. Thinking of people first, then everything else follows nicely.
Should be.
And following the same story on the people side. So I'm like to pass on. This is an amazing question that came out from somebody here in the audience, actually. So the insurance industry has significant influence on healthcare inequities. What can we do as an insurer on how we underwrite our business and how do we serve from a D&I lens? Oh, tough one. You know what? Underwriting is a sensitive question. Especially we insurers in the room, isn't it? It's like, yeah.
Healthcare? I think it's not in my wheelhouse in terms of underwriting healthcare, but I think in terms of how we underwrite from a D&I lens, I think it's about us being as open and as realistic as possible when we're assessing those particular risks. I think it's not having any form of biases within that process. And that can be anything from healthcare even through to some of the more retail and travel nature products that we underwrite. Yes. So I think it's making sure that process doesn't contain any bias. And that bias can be from the individual underwriter, but it is also could be translated in the products and the pricing that we're offering.
There's a reason why I asked Jimmy. So I know it's not in his wheelhouse, but it starts that conversation.
Absolutely.
That we do know that the way we underwrite today, unfortunately, there is bias. I'm sure we all know that. And the way we do pre-existing conditions, straight away we negate the policy. And I'm sure there are many insurers in the room here who understand that sometimes it is by design. The underwriting rules have been designed years ago, decades ago, that maybe requires a little bit of a revisit because the world has changed. So So I'm sure, like if I'm looking at Cynthia, so I'm sure clients will come and say, you know what, I want to do my policy a bit differently. I want to offer this benefit. So Marsh handles different kinds of benefits for many companies and clients.
Yes.
And likewise, what Philip will be doing as well. So people come to different reasons.
Yeah, I mean, maybe just to add on a thought that just came into my mind. I was listening to a podcast recently on captive insurance. And Facebook were talking about how they've established a captive because some of the D&I concepts that they wanted to offer within their employee benefits program are not available in the traditional insurance market. So you've actually seen this evolution coming from a buyer themselves who couldn't find the insurance solutions within the traditional market, and they've actually found a way through captive insurance to provide this. So as I think as an industry, it really raises the challenge that there are organisations that are asking for very different types of offerings and benefits when it comes to D&I associated topics.
That's cool. What do you think, Cynthia?
Yeah, I think it's, health and benefits is not my area, obviously. But I guess, we can offer more service on, analytic or, statistic so that, we can help, the underwriter to understand more of the client's risk. Even the D&I, different color or different, disease or genetic problem and stuff like that. I guess, this is one area we could have definitely help on.
Philip?
Yeah, I would say I echoed Jamie's and Cynthia's remarks. Yeah, for sure. I think quite a lot of people, they do have unconscious bias. They don't know, but when they were born and they got everything coming from the family or parental talk, and then say, oh, this is not good, this is bad. So particularly underwriters, sorry, I have to say that they are very cautious, or in some way, I would say they're a little bit pessimistic. And so when they look at the risk, they tend to look at the wrong, I wouldn't say the wrong side, but the poor side of the risk. So they can underwrite and put up the rates, and that sort of practice, they've been adapted for the last, let's say, 10, 20 years. So this is very much drive down to the personal characters or their understanding from what they have learned from they write previously. So they said, last time I saw this case, and this is bad. And then next time it's still a similar case, and they would copy the image into that one. Oh, look, there could be something wrong here. This is very much down to the personal characteristic. So that's why we always encourage people to have an authentic view, understanding. Well, everybody was born, say, color, and I like you said, we would like to have a fair skin. I mean, looking much more handsome, like Brad Pitt, of course, but you can't, right? That's
we all want to be Brad Pitt, I'm telling you.
The sort of thing. So yeah, but more understandable to the situation. Ask more questions so that you know more about the risk, and so to help out to come up with a proper underwriting.
The underwriting question, honestly, is a very sensitive question. And I think this is, as an industry, I think there's a huge opportunity as insurers and brokers to lead in this space. Underwriting doesn't have to be ad hoc. It doesn't have to be case-by-case basis. And when I have conversations with other insurers, they say, oh yeah, we still insure, but case-by-case basis. So why does it have to be case-by-case basis? Why not be an envelope? I think hopefully this will start conversations going forward that we can actually, as an industry, make that shift. Insurers are always seen to be the laggards, and more often than not. I think this is an opportunity for us to be ahead. So the last bit of the session, as we have a couple of minutes left, I would like to go on next steps. What can the audience today, on-site and online, take that one thing back to their workspace, to their communities and their friends and family? I'm sure you have done something. There's one thing that you'd like to share. It's something that you have, a great best practice.
I think best practice is constantly ensuring that we take that learning, but evaluate that learning on a regular basis. What works today might be different tomorrow. And I think often we forget kind of that refreshing a strategy or a policy and consultation with staff and getting that voice heard is absolutely imperative. So that would be my key takeaway.
Good.
Yeah, from my perspective, I think it's really about the importance of inclusion. I think, to really and truly create an inclusive society within an organisation where, people can bring their whole selves to work, you won't just see benefits from the daily happiness of your people, but you will see fundamental benefits within your organisation and the business that you're doing. So I really think that's a very, very key point. We introduced something at AXA XL Hong Kong in May last year where we actually launched an Inclusion and Diversity Committee, as we call it here. And it started small. It started with some cultural sharing. It started with some personal sharing. But you can see already that's starting to change the dynamic within the organisation. And I truly believe we're starting to see the benefits of that on the business side as well. So, yeah, I'm very proud about what the team have done on that side.
So this is good. Start having conversations.
Absolutely.
And do not shy away from having difficult conversations. I think that's a topic also. Yeah. Because we are always afraid to talk, I will offend you. You know what? Just talk and ask. I think having difficult conversations is a great starting point. So nicely said. Dr. Wong.
So from a mental health perspective, I think it is very important to keep connected. After all, we're social creatures and we have to be connected. A lot of people complain that there is a loss of social connectedness and also disrupted connectedness to the LGBT community, and therefore that adds to the stress from the pandemic. So I would say that keep connected and also listen to who's around you. Make sure that you do reach out to people you know to keep that connectedness, and that would be very beneficial to mental health.
Being humans, the only one thing that we do best is talking to other people.
Exactly, talking and listening.
No other animal can do that as well as we do. So I think continue talking and listening. There you go. You see, he caught me. Cynthia.
I think one thing to take away is, raise awareness and with an open mind and active listening. It's very important. I think within the company, we've run a couple of initiatives. It's like, employees assistance program. It's like 24/7 program for the employees and their immediate family. So that if they need help, they could just, call this hotline and then talk to someone apart from your manager. It's completely different from, your work team or your manager or anyone. And also, we have a wellness first aider program. So we have 17 of our colleagues, invested time to attend a training, structured training by an outside organization. So they are accredited as, wellness first aider. So I guess, we just want to raise awareness, especially for mental health, so that we are aware that, people around us may have, problems or issues or anxiety or just, worries. Yeah.
The wellness first aider concept is rather new in this region, and I think more and more are starting to happen, which I think is brilliant.
Yeah.
But again, the fear of me telling you my story is also still there, so I think it's a time to open up.
Yeah.
Philip?
Well, I don't have to say anything because they already covered it. Well, actually, from a national survey in the United States recently about pandemic, 72% of the population, 70% of the population refrain from voicing out help because either they have a mental disability, or because of the character, they're rather introvert and they are really afraid to speak out. So my suggestion is that everyone should reach out for the people next to you or close to you, because they might not able to express themselves why they need help. So there's something we have to do, something in addition to what we understand equality and equity. Of course, equity, we have to put more resources to help. As such. That's what I think.
Be that neighbor. Sometimes you just have to be that listening. Yeah. One though, I picked up very quickly. There's one phrase: resist business as usual, because business is no longer usual. The world has changed, so there's no such thing as BAU anymore. So there's a new way of working, there's a new style, there's a new humanity, new elements. So I think it's how we take it up in the future. So firstly, thank you so much for this amazing session. I think we all collectively learned quite a bit of stuff. So as a group, we are clear. Communicate, speak up, listen actively, and resist business as usual because it is no longer usual. So thank you so much, everybody, for that amazing session. There you go. Cheers.
So thank you to Sudesh and also, of course, to our panelists for the insightful discussion. Now, please let me invite Kenny to come on stage to present our token of appreciation to the moderator and panelists. Thank you. So now I'm going to introduce the speaker for the last session of Dive in Hong Kong, Mr. Trevor Smith, founder and executive coach, The Orchard Partnership, who will be sharing about empowering every voice, including yours. So let's welcome Trevor to the stage, please.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Look, great to be with you both in the room and also to be with you online. My name is Trevor Smith. I'm an executive coach and I'm also a team coach. And I have a real privilege of working with everyone across the whole diverse spectrum of people types and backgrounds and industries. It really is a real privilege to come and be part of this event today. What I'd like to do is just share with you really where we take things to the next level in terms of empowering. We've heard some amazing things as part of this conference today. Some wonderful thinking, some ideas, some open sharing, and some real mind-expanding concepts. What do we do now to take it as we go back into the workplace, into wherever we may be, as an individual or as part of a team? How do we actually take this and apply it to the next level and actually use it in a practical sense? And what I'd like to share with you now is some of the things that I've picked up, some tools and some methods that I think could share you. So over the next sort of 10 or 15 minutes, we're going to cover that. Now, this slide nicely encapsulates what I do. If you take it as your journey in your career as climbing up a mountain. Now, I started working in the insurance industry in 1984 as an underwriter, and I've actually been a member of the Chartered Insurance Institute since around 1986. So I'm a long timer in the industry. And just imagine if throughout my career I'd never changed. Imagine if I was still stuck back in time as to how things were back then. And so as you progress through your career, it's rather like climbing this mountain. As you can see, the people, when they've started in the valley, they're actually wearing shorts, they're wearing T-shirts, they're wearing flip-flops, as we call them in the UK. But as you progress and as you go through and you climb up the career ladder, what you'll find is that that equipment that you had at the start isn't suitable when you get to the summit. And when you get to the summit, you need to have changed your clothing, you need to have unpacked your rucksack and repacked it. And so you may have had to actually stop and reacclimatize at some point before you get to that summit. So as a coach, what I often find myself doing is walking with people through their career journey and how you adapt to working with others in, may have a different mindset to yourself, may have a different culture, background, LGBT, age groups, religious diversity, whatever it may be, we have to adapt as we go through. And indeed, not just adapt up to this point, but into the future. Because if we fast forward by, say, another 10 years, things are going to be fundamentally different than they are today. Now, I don't know if any of you have heard of this. It's called the overview effect. Now, the overview effect is where if I was to go up with you into space, like some of these billionaires seem to be doing these days, it's become very fashionable. If we were to go up into space and we were to look from our spaceship window back onto the Earth, we would see something like this. We would see this planet and we would look out of our portal and we would go, wow, we're just an insignificant small piece on the landscape. And when we come back to Earth, our thinking would have been changed because of that journey. And that's known as the overview effect. You can look it up, it's on Wikipedia, so it must be true. But the overview effect is a whole new way of seeing things. And so by being here today, you yourself are embracing that concept of looking at things very differently. And one of the ways we must consider is the reality where we are today is that we are on the cusp of a huge AI revolution. I've recently been part of a C-suite discussion group where we discussed the impact of AI and how that's going to affect our lives. And if you look at the research, the industries that are likely to be severely affected by AI into the future are industries where there's a high degree of automation, likely such as service industry and those industries that are not likely to be as affected by AI are those industries where human judgment and human behavior is fundamental. So for example, if you're a financial advisor, if you're an insurance broker, if you are part of an executive team, if you're an underwriter, for example, these industries require a huge element of judgment and human behavior is crucial. So how we behave as human beings is fundamental to our future, and diversity and inclusion and in fully embracing diversity is going to be one of the cornerstones of our future as the human race. And so I would encourage you just to think about what is it that you need to do to not just embrace potentially AI, but how do you embrace the complexities of cultural backgrounds, experiences, ages, mindsets, whatever it may be, the personality differences, all of those differences in order to perform at your best in your part of the insurance industry or whatever part of the world you live and work in. And the reality is that we are part of a complex ecosystem. No one fish can separate itself from the whole. Now, to illustrate this, I'll give you an example. When I was growing up, my father used to have a fish tank, just like this, sitting above our television. And he built a platform. And when I was a child, I would often find myself, losing concentration and looking up at this fish tank. And I noticed one thing, is that if you, for example, put an aggressive fish into the fish tank, it changes the behavior of all of the fish. And so you can't actually extract any one piece of the ecosystem without affecting the rest. So I'm going to ask you this question. How many teams are you in? Because most of us are part of multiple teams. And that's a fundamental question because you can't actually operate in isolation. And therefore, the days where you had the sort of lone ranger able to perform on their own have long gone. What we need now is collaboration is a popular word, but how do we work with others across different mindsets so that we get the best of the best? And just bear in mind that no matter who we all function as part of this big whole. So what type of team are you in? Maybe you're an operations team, maybe you're part of a sales team, a project team or an executive team. They're all teams, but they function very differently. Not all of them are interdependent. For example, if you work in a sales team, your performance isn't necessarily dependent upon anyone else in that sales team. However, if you're at executive level, if you're in an operations team or a project team, how you interact with others and embrace that is absolutely crucial. Now, there's a wonderful quote, from a professor in the UK. What puzzles me after 30 years of working with top teams is that individuals with an IQ of 120, when working as a team, often function with an IQ of 60. Why is that? And this is where I think diversity and inclusion and fully embracing differences can be an accelerator to where we go into the future. So how do we empower oneself to actually fully embrace and perhaps speak up? Well, I'm going to give you some tools shortly. But my definition of empower from the dictionary is really to give someone the authority or power to do something, or to make someone stronger or more confident, especially in controlling their life and claiming their rights. So I've now got a couple of things I'd like to share with you as to how you can actually embrace what you've picked up today. One of those is that those of you that follow football, or if you're from North America, let's call it soccer, the idea is that you have to have more, you can't have a football team with 11 goalkeepers. You've got to have a diverse team in order to achieve the performance. And so for me, my observation is that there are 3 types of diversity that I come across. The first one is more commonly thought of, your gender, sexual orientation, age, etc., health, disability, very common. But I would also add to that cognitive thinking, so how you make decisions. For example, are you a kind of big picture kind of person? Are you a more detailed kind of person? How do you actually take in information? And your style of thinking. These are all diversities that teams need to embrace alongside the traditional diversity of thinking and identity. But also personality, having a team that's made up of the panelists mentioned earlier about introverts, but making sure that you don't have a team that's full of extroverts or introverts, or perhaps someone who is overly planned and scheduled, or someone who's MrLastMinute.com. How do we make sure that we build a team that doesn't reflect who we are as an individual, but actually actively recruits for diversity in the workplace? And we all have different perspectives. Here you can see the same thing from a different angle. We must be willing to accept that others don't necessarily think or act the way we do. So there is a wonderful tool called the Diversity Awareness Ladder, whereby you can actually, if you do come across people in the workplace and you want to call them out, you could use this as a conversation starter, either with a team or with an individual, and say, okay, where do you fit on this diversity awareness ladder? And starting with 1 as a low point and progressively going down to 5 as a high point, you can actually call out and have adult discussions around inner conversations and outer conversations that affect the thinking for the team. And there's a wonderful video, if you haven't seen it, online. It's called Secrets of the Science of Persuasion. It's actually based on a book. And one of the cornerstones of top performance is what's known as the power of liking. People love to do business with people who actually are similar to them, not in terms of diversity. Let's take culture as an example. Not that way, but people who are of the same mindset. People who say, okay, I accept that we are a diverse team of differences. That's what I'm talking about. People with a similar acceptance. And the third point here, people who cooperate towards shared goals. So if you do find yourself in a situation where a team is diverse and you may be struggling to find common ground, always try to say, okay, what sort of third-party reference point can we find? What shared ground, common ground, can we find in order to then move forward into the future? So another concept I'd like to share with you is one of psychological safety, enabling people to speak up and empower them to feel confident. Psychological safety is very much a team construct as opposed to trust, which is a construct between 2 individuals. What do you need to do in your workplace, in your office, in your team, wherever you find yourself, to create psychological safety that people can speak up? And here I just want a few tips that you can actually apply, practically speaking. Give everyone a turn to speak, ask people what's going on, listen. I mean, it's all pretty basic stuff that we learned at school, but we often unlearn it as we get older. go around, give people the opportunity to speak, make sure everybody has a voice. If there is an emotion expressed, actually, call that emotion out and say, what's required from your teammates to support you at this moment if you're feeling emotional? And get people to share about what they respect about colleagues is another great place to go. Now, these slides, by the way, if you want copies of these, we can make them available. A couple of things to wrap up on. One would be, there are times when you have to call people out, and make sure that your meetings are just not a warm bath. That's not good value necessarily in a meeting if all you're going to do is agree with each other. So it's healthy and it's helpful to sometimes have permission to constructively challenge in a nice way. And so here's a way you could do that. I have a template, which is called the Crucial Conversations template. And it's a phraseology you might wish to use, which is a phrase expressed in one go, but it has 7 steps. So very briefly, before I begin to close off, it might go something like this. If you identify something in the workplace, you say, well, Bob, I'd like to talk to you about something I've noticed. For example, we don't have a particularly diverse team here. Now, when this happens, I feel sad because we're not fully utilizing the full breadth of thinking. Now, what's at stake here, and you can express the consequences of why a diverse or a single-focused team might not be good. Now, I may have contributed to this problem because maybe I didn't highlight it earlier, but I'm willing to resolve this with you now. How do we move forward and create a more diverse team? What do you think? Now, that kind of conversation is something I believe calling it out is important to do, and I thought I'd just share that tool with you. Many of my clients use it. Okay, so just closing off now, what next? Well, again, if you want copies of these slides, please contact us. We have a wonderful range of things we could share that would help to create diverse teams. I hope those simple ideas give you something, and I wondered if there are any online questions that perhaps we might have. So I'm going to just wrap up here. I'll pause for a moment and just see if we have anything coming through. Okay, I have got nothing on my screen, so I'm assuming we don't. May I just pause there and say, look, what a wonderful conference this has been. And hats off to all the organisers from the CII for actually organising this. I know a lot of work's gone in behind the scenes. I'm proud to be a Chartered Insurance Institute member for, I think it's something like 37 years. So thank you for all you listening online. Thank you for those in the room. Cece, I'll bring you back in at this point. Thank you.
Yes, so thank you so much, Trevor, for the insightful presentation. Can I please invite you to come to the middle of the stage? And now please let me invite Kenny to come on stage to present our token of appreciation. Thank you so much, Trevor. So once again, thank you, Trevor, for the presentation. So we almost come to the end of Dive in Hong Kong. So before we close today's session, I would like to invite Kenny, our regional director, to say a few words.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining the Dive in Hong Kong 2021. For those stay online and also staying here, and thank you so much. And many thanks for the honorable guests, speakers, panelists, and also a distinguished guest that have a very fruitful and very impressive discussion today. Thank you very much. And I'm Kenny Siu, Regional Director of the Chartered Insurance Institute, and based in Hong Kong. In the past 6 years, a variety of the diversity and inclusion topics have been covered during Dive In Festival. When we first support the festival, we would have never guessed how much support, encouragement, growth we would see from company and individual over the years. This year, the festival aims to bring a global impact by creating and empowering allies around the world. The 2021 festival theme is Active Allyship, calling the industry to turn intention into actions and to make changes that will help others succeed. Dive in Hong Kong is a result of a sector-wide collaboration now. Today, we have discussed the topics of empowering through inclusive communications and how these apply to workplace, the importance of allies among executives, the future of diversity and inclusion. Following the pandemic, equality and empowerment, how to empower your voice, including yours. We have achieved so much in the time we have been here and gained a lot of ourselves too. I would like to take this opportunity to thank both our global and local festival partners to make the Dive-In event a success today. They include Village Tower Watson, Kennedy's, March, the Canadian Chambers of Commerce in Hong Kong, Center for Diversity and Inclusion Asia, British Consulate General Hong Kong, the Australia Institute of Building Hong Kong, AMG Wealth Management, Lover Insurance Consultant, Fielden Hong Kong, SmartTop Consultancy Group, the Tokyo Marine Fire and Marine Insurance, Ultras Financial Group, Zhongxing Benevolent Society, Dynasty Financial Group, Luxor Consultants, Meritage Insurance Consultant, Global Apex, Yet Commercial Partners, IPP Wealth Advisor, the technical support team here, and also the CI Hong Kong teammates. Of course, a special thanks to Manulife team, especially Anil and Sudesh, for their tremendous support and providing such a fantastic venue with a spectacular harbor view. Last but not least, sure the journey to an inclusive workplace does not stop here. Please continue to follow Dive-In as it has grown to be a global sector-wide festival. Thank you once again for joining the event today. Thank you very much and have a good evening. Thank you so much.
So thank you, Kenny. And we have come to the end of Dive-In Hong Kong, Empowering Through Inclusive Communications. Thank you once again to our wonderful speakers and panelists. And thank you to our festival partners. And of course, thank you to all of you joining us here and also virtually today. Like Kenny mentioned, I believe the journey of the inclusive workplace doesn't stop here. Let's create a fairer future in the industry where everyone has a voice. So we look forward to seeing you at other Dive-In events, which you may check at the Dive-In 2021 Festival website. So once again, thank you everyone. Thank you.